The Liberal leadership race is heating up. The Conservatives have a new ad campaign, and the Canadian premiers are back from their trip to Washington, D.C. And so is political commentator Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun, who joins me now. Brian, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back, despite the deep snow here.
Yeah, well, it's February. We can't get around it, unfortunately. Okay, so let's jump into politics here. So it appears that Liberal leadership hopeful Mark Carney has been speaking on an issue very important to Albertans, which is pipelines. And some are saying that he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. So in Kelowna last week, he said that he'd use emergency powers to build major projects, but in French, he's saying something different. So what is he promising Quebec?
He definitely is speaking out of both sides of his mouth. So in Kelowna, it was all about build, build, build. Energy infrastructure is important. We have to get it done, even if that means using the emergency powers of the federal government to do that. A lot of people thought he was talking about using the Emergencies Act for whatever reason. Now, there are different powers the federal government has, including ones that could allow them to expedite building pipelines. But then he does an interview in French, and he's asked, well, would you put this in against like an east-west pipeline against the wishes of Quebec? No. Well, never? Never, he says. And he's asked time and again, would provinces have veto over pipeline projects? And he said, yes, and I would never impose one upon Quebec. So two very different messages. And look, there was a time when politicians, to a degree, could get away with saying one thing in English and one thing in French because, well, not enough people are speaking both languages or we're not paying attention.
I was going to say, it pays to be bilingual these days, especially, right?
And we've got the interwebs where people share things, and so I mean, there's already video going around that combines Carney in Kelowna with Carney on CBC in French. It's very damaging to him. It really makes him look like he's not being forthright. But look, this is a guy who also said he would balance the budget within 3 years. Well, he's talking about massively increasing defense spending, infrastructure projects, but also keeping all of the liberal social programs that they're just starting, like dental, which is going to get more expensive by the year. And then it turns out, well, no, he's not really going to balance the budget. He's going to split the budget in two, and all the deficit stuff will be over here in the capital budget, but the operating budget, he will balance. That's not telling the truth. You're trying to go around things, just like his carbon tax. So this is probably, I'd say, the third time. He said he'd get rid of the consumer carbon tax, but then he would dramatically increase the industrial carbon tax, and he wants to put a carbon tariff on imports from outside of the country. Well, you're essentially making us pay more for imported goods, which is another way of saying a carbon tax. So Mark Carney isn't exactly being truthful or forthright with voters. And there's a very good chance that, where are we now? February 18th, and just over 2 weeks, he will become prime minister.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. And then we've got a recent poll now showing a majority across Canada supporting projects like the Energy East pipeline. So does that support extend into Quebec?
It is about 76, 77% across the country say, yeah, they support that project now. And that's about the level of support even in Alberta, surprisingly enough. Support in Alberta is down. And I have to wonder, is that because some people are just pessimistic about it now and say, well, it'll never happen? But in Quebec, support was up from the low to mid 30s back in 2019, but only up to 47%. So not quite half yet. Quebec is still not on board pipelines. Sure, they want the revenue from the transfer payments, equalization. They want the benefits of an economy that is supported by the oil and gas sector in so many ways, but they don't want pipelines. There's already pipelines in Quebec. They are just very hypocritical, and a lot of it driven by media outlets like what we saw, badgering politicians not to support anything that comes from Alberta.
Okay, Brian, last week when we spoke, you were in Washington, D.C. following the premiers around, and there have been critics of the trip saying that they didn't accomplish anything, even comparing their meeting at the White House to a meeting with the kitchen intern. But you were there, Brian, and you take a different view, a different approach, and say that the trip was worth it. So why do you say that?
Well, first off, just the number of meetings that they had were fantastic. So individually, each premier was off meeting people that were important to them. Um, you know, Premier Danielle Smith meeting with Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary, who is very important when it comes to the oil and gas industry. Things like if they were to bring back a Keystone XL pipeline, he'd be a key driver of that. He'd be an influencer. People like Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota. He shares a border with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. He met with all the premiers, but also individually met with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Saskatchewan Scott Moe met with Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, one of the leaders of the GOP. So, you're making these connections, you're making Canada's case, and you can run down the list of, I believe that Premiers Moe and Smith had joint meetings at times with people who are on the Energy Committee. Those meetings matter. The personal connection matters. And I've been saying this for a while now. It is of greater importance in Washington, D.C. than in Ottawa. It's of greater importance than in Toronto. I don't do business in Calgary quite like I used to, so I can't say there. But they put an incredible emphasis on that one-on-one meeting. And I think, I was about to call him Senator, Premier Wab Kinew of Manitoba, he put it this way. He said, this is a charm offensive, and it's about shaking the hand, looking someone in the eye, smiling at them, and making a connection. On the White House meeting, I couldn't believe how dismissive some people were. And if you think that meeting with James Blair, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, and Sergio Gore, who's in charge of his personnel, if you think that's the kitchen intern, then you know nothing about Trump's world, okay? Um, Look, a group of business leaders was also down with the premiers, and some of them met with Kevin Haslett, one of Trump's key economic advisors. That was a great meeting for them to get over at the White House. James Blair is a different cat. Is he a cabinet secretary? No. He's the guy in charge of legislation and policy for the White House. That's his job. He was also key in Trump's winning campaign, reaching out to people that don't normally vote and getting them out to the polls. Sergio Gore is one of the tightest people with Trump. Those were the two people. They were originally only supposed to meet Blair, and Gore dropped by and sat in on the meeting. It went well until David Eby of British Columbia made some stupid comments outside and saw Blair take to social media. That wasn't a good outcome, but the rest of the meeting, I'm told, was good. And they've been invited back for future meetings with people like Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick once he's actually confirmed.
Okay, good to know. And one of the people that you interviewed was Steve Bannon, the former chief strategist for Donald Trump. And so what did he tell you about Trump's musings about Canada becoming the 51st state? That seems to be, making its rounds again. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, well, well over 500,000 people, probably over 600,000 people have watched my interview with Steve Bannon. If you want to see it, you can find it on YouTube, on X, on my Facebook page. It is around and getting lots of views. He said Trump is not trolling. He is very serious about this. We talked a lot about national defense, national security. This is what's driving it. And he connected for people who want to listen and understand the thinking. And that's my whole goal in going to talk to Bannon. Bannon knows how Trump thinks, knows the man well. He's not in the White House anymore, but still very key to the MAGA movement. And I said, okay, I understand why the president is talking about Greenland and China's influence in Greenland and the strategic minerals that are there, but also access to the Arctic. I understand the president talking about the Panama Canal because China currently controls ports on either side of this canal, and this is a canal that is vital to American interests. I said, I don't get the Canada point. And he brought it all back. And he said, it's China. And he said, you guys used to be very secure in the north because the Arctic was frozen. It's not anymore. And now it's become your soft underbelly. And China wants in there. Russia wants in there. They're sending ships in, and you guys can't even do anything about it. that Trump will move ahead towards this idea of a 51st state, or we're going to have to take things seriously and be a good and valued partner. It sounds like either way, Trump wants a closer relationship, and we're either going to get closer to the US or we're going to be cast out and put into Beijing's orbit. I don't think that's where we want to go. We won't be getting the kind of favorable trade arrangements if we decide that we're going to partner with Beijing the way some people in Canada want to, because they're just angry at Trump. So very enlightening interview, very informative, and I'd encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, that's really eye-opening for sure. Because there was so much talk about the border issue, and Brian, you've said that fentanyl came up over and over again with the Americans, but the Canadian government is saying that less than 1% of fentanyl in the U.S. comes from Canada. So why do the Americans see things so differently?
Well, one, they don't believe that we're prosecuting people properly. They don't believe that we are catching or that they're catching the fentanyl that's going across. In fact, just as we were leaving or just after we left, there was a bust at a shipping facility in Seattle. A pound of fentanyl, which is a lot of fentanyl, that can kill an awful lot of people. It was found, it had been shipped down in a package from Canada. And while they were doing spot checks, they found it. We need to take the fentanyl issue seriously so that our border doesn't become thickened the way it is elsewhere, right? Our two-way trade requires us to be able to move goods quickly and speedily. It doesn't take a long time to get across the US border from Canada, and we want to keep it that way. So people keep saying to me, but it's up to the Americans to find this stuff. Well, you could argue that, or you could argue we need to find it before it leaves, before it heads down there, because otherwise that border will get thick. That truck will take a long time to cross over. You will take a long time to cross over, driving down to see family or friends or do shopping or go on a vacation, what have you. We don't want that border to get thick. And they believe that it is coming through the mail, that trucking firms are now moving an awful lot of this in connection with cartels and triads, and they want it stopped. So it's not helpful. And I was told time and again, every business leader told me it came up in the meeting. The politicians told me it came up in the meetings. And the federal government downplaying this, even as they appointed a fentanyl czar, that does not go over well. The fact that we did appoint a fentanyl czar, that did go over well. But trying to downplay it, is I keep saying that this relationship is like a marriage. Well, if one partner in the marriage says there's a problem and the other person just keeps saying, no, there isn't, you're going to end up in an argument.
Yeah,
So,
there is a problem, obviously.
yeah, listen and respond. Don't just say there's no problem over and over again.
All right, so we're going to switch gears here, talk about the Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre gave a passionate defense of Canada over the weekend with a speech on Flag Day. Obviously, patriotism has gone up lately with all of this talk of the 51st state. But what did you take away from the speech there, Brian?
It was an amazing expression of positive patriotism. Too much of our patriotism is centered on booing the Americans. And Pierre stood up in Ottawa. Thousands of people were there, not hundreds, as some have claimed. They had to have two overflow rooms, and they were at capacity as well. And he plainly said that Canada will not be the 51st state, but also defended Canada from a very positive point of view, not a negative point of view. Too much of how we define ourselves as Canadians, in my view, is, with phrases like, well, we're not American, or we're just like Americans, but with no guns and better healthcare. Thankfully, Pierre didn't go that route. I said to a few conservatives that Pierre Poilievre did a great job delivering the speech, and that whoever wrote the speech should get a raise. Well, it turns out he's the one that wrote the speech. It was those were his own words, and he spoke from the heart, and I thought it was great. And at the same time as that's going on, the party's launched new ads. Maybe you saw them if you were watching any of the Four Nations face-off hockey games, and they're taking a bit of a different turn. They're still pointing out the things that have gone wrong under the Trudeau Liberals, but with a very patriotic message, a hint at what's going on in Canada-U.S. relations. One of them ends with Pierre Poilievre and his wife, Anna, raising up the Canadian flag, talking about bringing hope back to the country. So overall, I think he's doing a very good job of pivoting, carbon tax is still very important. The Liberals won't stop talking about it. But he's got to pivot to where the attention and the mood of the nation is now. And I think he did that with the speech and with these new ads.
Okay, so it sounds like they're taking a bit of a new position, but maybe not necessarily changing their message entirely, right?
Yeah, not completely. They're adjusting. Let's put it that way. It's not a pivot. And and I keep hearing the Liberal talking heads on TV say, "Well, how can you say that you're all for Canada when you said the country was broken?" Pointing out that rents have doubled, mortgage, home prices have doubled, the immigration system is broken, the passport system. You couldn't get a passport for a while. Remember, you used to have to pay people to stand in line at the passport office for you. Pointing all that out doesn't mean you don't love your country. It means the country's not working and you want it to be better. So it's a bit of a disingenuous message from the Liberals when they're attacking Polyev on that. The country has been broken. And guess what? Now, all the Liberal leadership candidates, the people who want to be PM, are saying, yeah, the carbon tax, yeah, we're going to get rid of that kind of. And the immigration system's broken and we got to fix it. And we got to do all the things that Pierre Polyev said were wrong. We've got to fix them. I don't know why they're claiming that he's got a disingenuous message when they clearly do.
We're about out of time here, but Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you.